So it is always very exciting when I see a message from our group of translators that they have more things translated. They have been rather quiet for the last 2 months, and I'm starting to worry that they're giving up. But they're not. But like all of us, they have other things that they are busy with. And so they have been doing their best. And so please continue to include them in your practices and prayers for them to stay focused and being able to help us to continue to translate. I'm hoping more and more that this translation project will turn into a meaningful publication. 2 levels of publishing. One is to publish first just a collection of the teachings, to publish internally in the form of books. I'm still trying to figure out where to do that. Maybe in the end, it's easier to just do it in the US. I was trying to do it in Malaysia, but that's maybe not so practical. Just to publish a number of copies in the US. The main publisher that I'm hoping to publish with, they have suggested that we avoid circulating these in the form of PDF files, because then it makes it hard for them to want to publish it if everyone has a copy of it. So if you have not, if you feel like you have not been getting more updates on the translations, please know that it's not because I don't want to share them. But the publisher has said, once these things have, circulated too much as PDF files, it's hard for them to want to print them. Because after all, even these publishers, they have to make money. Otherwise, the business cannot continue. So, some of the limitations. Yeah. So anyway, it's progressing along, just so to say. And there is, I want to acknowledge, although I don't think you are here part of this group, but there is a couple of people who have made it a monthly pledge. So monthly have been sending me a couple of pages. So that is definitely very helpful. But also to say to the rest, we still have money, including if we need to publish in the US first, a first selection. We might have enough to do that as well. So to self-publish at the beginning, not as PDF, but as these physical copies. So we have enough, insofar as that, but also to rejoice in how a couple of you I've noticed have made it a monthly thing to dedicate to publishing, to translate these very precious teachings. They are very unique. I mean, of course, I'm biased, but I've read a lot of Tibetan Buddhist texts. And this set of teachings, they're very unique. Their style and their flavor is very unique. Many of them even have what people might call a Zen-like quality to them. It raises a question without necessarily answering it. It uses like animatic phrases to kind of provoke a thought, a consideration, and they'll say, think about it, just think about it, which is unusual for the Tibetan text traditions. Definitely not so codified and predictable as later Tibetan Buddhist literature. This is a time where things are still very fresh and also very clear at this point that Kyoba Rinpoche and this early Drigung Kagyu community, they were reading sutras in ways that Tibetan Buddhism don't normally read sutras directly. Tibetan Buddhism relies so much on commentary. Commentaries of commentaries, commentaries of commentaries, sub-commentaries of commentaries, and very analytical, not much engagement directly with sutras. But it seems that at least Kyoba Rinpoche and probably his immediate disciples, they were interested in reading sutras directly because they quote from sutras that are not normally quoted by other people. If you look at like say the last 500 years of Tibetan Buddhist writing, or writing in commentaries or writing teachings, what they quote from is fairly predictable. And the examples they use are fairly predictable. Because a certain set has been reproduced. But again, when you look at Kyoba Rinpoche's references and what he quotes, they're very unpredictable. And also, then you have to look up and say, oh, what story is he talking about here? So he quotes from, the translators have said that they now think he was reading sutras. Bear in mind that during that time it's not so easy to come about the sutras. Not like now, you go to Google, you find anything. There, to find a copy of a particular text, maybe you have to travel a few months, but somehow, of course, after he became a prominent teacher, I'm sure people came from far and wide offering him texts, sutras, tantras. Also quite clear that he did not spend that much time reading, these commentaries and sub-commentaries. So he read more directly. He read more directly these original sources. So it's very, I would say, different from most of the things that we see. Okay, so now Gongchik, Statement 9. The Buddha performs the activity, meaning the Buddha performs Buddha activities with anything existing within the objects of knowledge. So the Buddhas, not just a Buddha, but all Buddhas, they carry out their Buddha activities using whatever. This phrase, right, within the objects of knowledge, I think if you, what we would say in our, common use is like everything that exists. It's a technical term. So within the objects of knowledge, meaning anything that exists, they only exist insofar as they are knowable. They can be known. So within the objects of knowledge, in our common expression would be anything that exists. So in other words, here it's saying that the Buddhas, when they carry out their Buddha activities, they are not limited to only manifesting like a Buddha-like figure, which is what other people say. So people claim that the Buddha accomplishes the benefit of beings through Buddha emanations, but not through anything else. So there are some people, although now I don't know if any Tibetan Buddhists will insist that, when Buddhas appear, they have to appear like Buddha, or, what we think of like Buddha. Like a Nirmanakaya form that has the 32 signs and 80 signs, all of that. And so apparently there were some who said that, when Buddhas appear, when they come and appear to benefit beings, they always turn up in these, Buddha emanations that people recognize. But Kyopa Rinpoche says here, no. Anything that is an object of knowledge, meaning anything that exists, including even inanimate, a chair, a lamp, a road, a bridge. Here Kyopa Rinpoche says, well, if Buddhas have to manifest that to guide beings, they do that. No limit. Now, even though I say, I'm sure no Tibetan Buddhist will say, oh, Buddhas, when they appear, it's only limited to Buddha-like appearances. So we might not say that, in that way. We might not make the statement in that way. But in terms of our attitude, I think often our attitude is like that. If it doesn't look like a Buddha, then, well, I'm sure it's not a Buddha. So this statement is cautioning us to say, Buddha activities can manifest in various ways. Not just limited to what we stereotypically think, oh, Buddhas are like this, like this, like this. Now, of course, this is said within a broader context where in other places, it's very clear, as we have seen, Kyopa Rinpoche emphasizes the need to behave, to appear in ways that are conducive to others, not scandalize others, right? The necessity of Buddhas, gurus, in not like harming others or appearing in forms that harm others. Don't create scandals. Don't behave in outrageous ways. So elsewhere, Kyopa Rinpoche emphasizes that, right? Don't appear in outrageous ways. Don't in other words, like talk about, like, oh, this is like manifesting wrathful, manifesting craziness, this, that. For the most part, Kyopa Rinpoche in other Vajra statements say, no. You have to be careful with disciplined conduct. Take the example of Buddha Shakyamuni, our common reference point. Look at how careful Buddha used his words, handle people. If you look at Buddha Shakyamuni's life story, he never provokes people the way that sometimes we think, oh, a really enlightened being might provoke people, challenge people, up in the face of people. You don't see that profile with regards to Buddha Shakyamuni. And Kyopa Rinpoche says, like we should act like that. So on the one hand, there is that emphasis, right? But again, here in statement 9, it's within that context, but also reminding us, now, also don't get so rigid and think, that Buddha activities are only limited to kindly, gentle, all of that. Because Buddha activities are unfathomable. Our limited minds cannot But here also the emphasis is more that the unimpeded nature and the unconditioned nature of Buddha's compassionate activities. So many places in the sutras, it says, a great bodhisattva such as Avalokiteshvara, like in the Lotus Sutra, it says, he can appear as a butcher. He can appear as a hunter. He can appear as a demon king. If that's what's necessary to lead someone out of confusion. He might appear blind even if he's not blind. He might appear mute even if it is not actually mute. Whatever. So that chapter in the Lotus Sutra is emphasizing the power of a Buddha's compassion in the form of Avalokiteshvara. That Avalokiteshvara does not say, oh, you have to live up to my standards before I can help you. Sometimes we when we're not careful, we behave like that. We as in Buddhist teachers, we as in Buddhist centers, we sometimes, make the mistake of like expecting others to first live up to our standards before we would pay any attention to them. And that is a fault. Yeah? So this is how I am, kind of hearing this statement. So even though the statement seems to contradict a position that we think, oh yeah, I don't believe in that, yeah, of course. So then we think, oh, this statement is just, very plain. But actually, this statement is also pointing to sometimes how we behave, even if we might not say so. Oh, Buddhas only appear in Buddha-like forms. But the way we act, it shows that actually we believe in that. So unless someone, matches exactly like what we call Buddha form, we think, no, that's not. Yeah? So fine balancing act. One side, Gyalpa Rinpoche says, with regards to Buddhist teachers, with regards to Buddhist practitioners, take the example of Buddha Shakyamuni. Act carefully, skillfully, in an agreeable way. Don't act, frivolously. Don't act, scandalously. You might think, I'm beyond all these conventions, but you live in a conventional world. So on the one hand, he reminds us that. And then he talks about karma and how subtle karma is, all the many, many subtle levels of karma that we should not ignore. But Buddha gave us guidance how to navigate all those more subtle points of karma that we don't see yet how it's related. Then we have to, on the basis of faith, say, okay, I will listen to what the Buddha has recommended, because even though I cannot see exactly why that particular action could lead to something clearly negative, but I trust the prescription that has been given. A lot of what the Buddha prescribed, is quite obvious. You can see the cause and effect. But there are also more and more subtle points of training where it's a lot harder to see. Just like a set of untrained eyes would look at a piece of wood that has been finished, polished, everything, and look at it and say, oh yeah, it looks good. But a master craftsman, a master woodworker will look and see, oh, actually, there's a lot more that can be done. There's more polishing that needs to be done because the particular wood grain is not exactly coming out yet. So to us untrained eyes, we look at a piece of wood and that has been finished and we think, oh, yeah, it's good, it's perfection. But to very trained eyes, a woodworker. They're like, no, there is more there. Yeah. So same with these points of training. But then, in doing that, don't then make the mistake of thinking, oh, Buddha's activities will always correspond to our expectations. It says no. Yeah? So here, the Buddhas perform their activities of benefiting others with anything that exists within what is knowable. Because the Omniscient One knows the thoughts, constitutions, abilities, and latencies of the trainees, he reveals Buddha activities in perfect harmony with the constitutions of sentient beings. And so because he can see without error, they can see without error the particularities of each being. Therefore, they can work in perfect harmony with the constitutions of sentient beings. Furthermore, due to the being's various individual karma, there is no certainty that he reveals himself only as the Buddha. So sometimes Buddhas reveal themselves as a demon. Hence, when the time has come to train a trainee, he reveals himself to pure trainees as the Sambhogakaya. So for those trainees who have for those trainees who have gone so refined, then he appears as Sambhogakaya. To others, as the supreme emanation body, like Buddha Shakyamuni, as a supreme Nirmanakaya, or a lower Nirmanakaya. He furthermore reveals himself as a Buddha, a Bodhisattva, a Shravaka, a Parteka Buddha, Brahma, Indra, the four great kings, or a Chakravartin king. Furthermore, if it is his intention, he also trains them by appearing as a being of the three lower realms and as material things, as earth, water, fire, wind, and space. Buddha activity is the fundamental nature of the aspiration to teach whoever needs training. So the fundamental nature of aspiration bodhicitta manifests as Buddha activity. Remember how, right? It says aspiration bodhicitta is not just a means to an end. In fact, aspiration bodhicitta is what Buddhas constantly are aspiring. Aspiring as in, I want to free beings. I want beings to be free. I want beings to be liberated. So when we generate aspiration bodhicitta, we should not think, that this is a means to become Buddha. But this is to aspire to liberate beings from suffering. Is in itself a Buddha activity. So in that way, we are manifesting our Buddha activities. Now, to perform the Buddha activity through food and fragrance is taught in the Vimalakirti Nidesha Sutra in the story of Tathagata Sugandha Kutta. So there's a Buddha in this sutra called Vimalakirti Nidesha. That Buddha used food, like tasty food, and fragrance, meaning like the good life. That Buddha used that to teach and transform certain beings. To perform Buddha activity through clothing is taught in the Sagara Nagaraja Paripricha Sutra. To perform Buddha activity by arranging various realms of the world and with trees is taught in the Dharma Sangiti Sutra. To perform Buddha activity with desire is as in the case of the fully ordained monk Tempe Lodro and the woman who has an emanation. To perform Buddha activity with hatred is as in the case where the Buddha from the southern direction perceived all worlds while turning the wheel of Dharma. In the Buddha feel extensive joy. Basically, Chodra is giving these examples found in the different sutras. Again, these sutras, not often quoted. These various stories. Lastly, in the Bodhisattva Gochara Sutra, it is taught that even the non-Buddhists are instruments of the Buddha's blessing and skillful means. If that is the case, since he had accumulated the karma of having no rival, there has never been a person who could compete with the Buddha. Those who appeared as non-Buddhist contemporaries of the Buddha were displayed in the manner through the Buddha's compassion. But in truth, there were no non-Buddhists appearing at the same time as the Buddha, meaning there were no real opponents of the Buddha, because it's not possible to even oppose the Buddha. I talked about this last time. Right? It says, so we have stories, for example, right? And the Buddha displayed the miracles to overcome confusion, right? We celebrated that for 2 weeks. We did the 35 Buddha confession, right? That time, right, is the display of the miracles in order to overcome wrong views taught by other teachers during his time. According to this interpretation, it says, actually, even that was the Buddha's skillful way of teaching disciples. But in truth, there were no non-Buddhists appearing at the same time as the Buddha. This is not saying there were no beings who were trainees. Here, non-Buddhist means there were no one who could really challenge or obstruct the Buddha. If they look like they were obstructing the Buddha, if they look like they were successfully, if even temporarily successfully opposing the Buddha, that's not really the case, it says. Thus, it is clearly taught in the previously mentioned sutras. So another quote, in whichever country the Golden King appears, Golden King is Buddha. This is from the Bodhisattva Gochara Sutra. After that, there appear no other accumulations of iron. So when gold has appeared, there is no iron around. Wherever the guide who has attained awakening appears in that world, the assemblies of non-Buddhists do not appear. The wish-fulfilling jewel comes together with stones, but in truth, that never happens. Similarly, it never occurs that the precious Buddha and non-Buddhists appear in the same world. Meaning the precious Buddha and anyone who could substantively oppose Buddha's wisdom, that's not possible. Thus, even such forms as the appearance of Purunakashyapa are in essence taught as a portrayal of the blessing activities of the Buddha. So, Manjushri, you have to understand that here in this Buddha field, the others, the non-Buddhists, the ascetic yogis, Mashkari Gosaliputra, one of the main kind of figures during the time of the historical Buddha, is said to teach another system. Or in any form in which they appear, they are the inconceivable sphere of the Tathagata's blessing and his skillful means. (654) When the time comes for a Buddha to carry out the activity by means of anything that exists within the objects of knowledge, it is done. What is called Buddha activity is to effect the benefit of sentient beings. Furthermore, the quote from the Sanjayagata has established that from the great liberation, the arising of gnosis in a moment, to activities that accord with merit and the cultivation of even small virtuous thought, everything is the activity of Buddhas. Therefore, In this discussion of performing the Buddha activity, with whatever exists within the objects of knowledge, the sickness of this belief is uncalled for. In truth, whatever exists within the objects of knowledge is not external to the Buddha himself. Thus, the Guhyagarbha Tantra says, from the beginning, the three realms of existence are Buddha, and absolutely all phenomena are nothing but Buddha itself. Phenomena that are not Buddha have not been found by Buddha. So this is saying from the view of Buddhas, from the position of Buddhas, everything has been perfected into the Buddha state. And that is the ultimate status of things. So from another perspective, you can also see how the so-called oppositions to Buddha Shakyamuni, ultimately they are not oppositions. Right? So on the conventional level, you can see that they are debating. But we should think of that debate as more, the debate is happening to help clarify the doubts of those watching the debate. So in that sense, we can say, we don't need to get in the business of saying, oh, in that debate, our Buddha, he was right. He won. And who he debated, oh, they lost. So this is not like watching a football game. My favorite team wins. The opposing team lost. Here is teaching us to look at the quote-unquote opposing team as a way to help eliminate some points that needs to be made. That's why even in the study of Gongchik, I've said, way when we started, so it sounds like it's critiquing or criticizing other people's interpretation. But in the end, our business is not to go dwell on how these other people are wrong. Particularly like, when Chodra brings in Sakya Pandita. Kyoba Rinpoche himself never, because when Kyoba Rinpoche was active as a teacher, Sakya Pandita was a little child. No context for Kyoba Rinpoche to talk about Sakya Pandita, but only later, right? So even when Chodra brings Sakya Pandita into the picture and to criticize Sakya Pandita's interpretation of Gongchik, and therefore Sakya Pandita's disagreement with Gongchik, it's not our business to get into like, oh, Sakya Pandita was wrong. But in the same fashion, to see how during the Buddha's time, those who debated him, we should not think them as ultimately kind of like these people who are wrong, but rather that they are part of the particular Buddha Shakyamuni's display in order to teach those of us who needs to be trained. Likewise here. What Kyoba Rinpoche is saying in these Vajra statements, we should relate to them as Vajra statements for me. So even if there is an opposing view, and often there is an opposing view, look into ourselves to see how those opposing views actually might be living in us, so to say. So then we remove those views. So that this doesn't turn into some kind of sectarian squabbling and arguing. So here it says, such an instruction may be very surprising, but in fact, that is the way it is. The way it is, meaning, this instruction that says, everything is perfect in this Buddha state. It says, this might sound very surprising. I thought there are these others who have all these wrong views. Why suddenly now says, they are all Buddha? He says, but it might sound very surprising, but in fact, this is the way it is. Moreover, the medicine through which one remains unafraid is expressed in the sutra. Whoever harbors no doubt concerning the embryo of the Sugata that is not yet free from the filthy pit of the womb, harbors no doubt concerning the Dharmakaya of the Buddha. Therefore, since the Dharmakaya, like the limits of space, impartially pervades everything down to the infinite finest particles, what need is there to mention the natural continuum of sentient beings? So in other words, here it's saying, if the Dharmakaya pervades everything, then how can there be anything that is not already the Dharmakaya, that is already Buddha? So finally, a quote from the Dharma Sangiti Sutra. It is like this. If, for instance, one has all the firewood, but the conditions and the effort are not complete, then it will not burn and will not fulfill your needs, your need to have warmth or your need to have fire to cook. Similarly, all the Tathagatas may exist in all the objects of knowledge, but if the conditions such as faith and effort are not complete, they will not appear, and they will also not perform Buddha activity. So now to remind us, still, as great as Buddha's compassion may be, the Buddha's compassion, as pervasive as the Buddha element is in everything and anything, they still need the interdependence of our faith and devotion to draw them out. So here, this discussion takes us to how, so in this way, Buddhas and Buddha activities pervade everything. Because they are the nature of things. So in that way, they are not just limited to what we call beautiful things, pleasant things. Oh, Buddha Shakyamuni is so pleasant. And then we look at a tantric deity like Yamantaka. You're like, oh, it's so terrifying. I say, no, it's equally Buddha pervades everything. And these Buddha qualities pervade everything. But still, the interdependence of our faith and our effort are needed in order to draw out these qualities. Because if we cannot draw out these qualities, like the analogy of the sun is always in the sky. But if we're on the dark side, then we cannot be warmed by the sun. If we are under a big shade, we cannot be warmed by the sun. So we need to walk out of the shade. Or we need to fly to another side of the world in order to get the warmth of the sun. So, Sobish's notes, basically he identifies those references and he gives us those stories, each of them, of how Buddha used this or that in order to draw other people out and towards the path of liberation. So Dorje Sherab, he tells us, if you have the book, this is page 656. Dorje Sherab divides the extraordinary examples provided in the commentaries into three sections: material things, non-Buddhist teachers, and Mara and afflictions. Meaning that Buddhas can appear as material things, as non-Buddhist teachers, and even as Mara and afflictions in order to lead beings out of confusion and suffering. So for the first group, we find mention of the Vimalakirti Sutra with the story of Tathagata Sugandhakutta. In that Buddha field, even the houses and avenues are made of various perfumes, and the food eaten by those bodhisattva also has a beautiful and strong fragrance. So the bodhisattva Vimalakirti brings food from that Buddha field to where he resides near Vaishali. A great multitude of beings are attracted by that fragrance, and when they all receive a share of the food, they obtain bliss. Then the bodhisattvas accompanying Vimalakirti from that land explain that Tathagata Sugandhakutta never teaches the Dharma through words, but only through fragrance emitted by trees through which bodhisattva achieve concentration. So very kind of interesting case, that somewhere in a different universe, there's a Buddha called Sugandhakutta. Sugandha means good fragrance. Su is like sukha, which means happiness. Su is good. Gandha is fragrance. In fact, one of the incense mix that we have at Tibetan Spirit is called Sugandha. I gave it that name. Those incense mix, I came up with the particular combination. Anyways, there's a Sugandha. So this is Sugandhakutta. Means like dwelling in good fragrance. So this Buddha apparently doesn't even teach with words. He has designed everything in his world where the smells that the beings smell is enough to lead them to a meditative state, to them giving up distractions, giving up confusion. That's how special it is. So this is the using of material things to guide and to lead beings out of confusion. I remember reading about Lama Yeshe, one of the early pioneers of Buddhism in the West. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche is the Nyingma Kagyu representative. On the Gelugpa side, there is Lama Yeshe. Lama Yeshe passed away relatively young. So then his work was continued by his main disciple, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So today, the Foundation for the Preservation of Mahayana Tradition, one of the main Buddhist groups, a Gelugpa group, started by Lama Yeshe. I remember Lama Yeshe's biography would highlight how he liked to eat, and he, when he came to the West, when he met people, he would spend hours talking to people about food and how to prepare food, and the ins and outs of like cooking. And a lot of people who are new to the Dharma would accidentally kind of, or would meet him and thinking that he's going to talk Buddhist talk or, Dharma talk, he just, talked to them about food. And then eventually, they became open and interested to the Dharma. And then they became his disciples. Or that he had this ability, to kind of reach across to people by relating to them on the level that they. So that's basically what we're talking about here, being able to relate to more and more people, connecting with them at their current interest point and leading them into the gate of liberation. Furthermore, Dorje Sherab refers to the Sagramati Sutra, which teaches the accomplishment of Buddha activity through clothing and other material things. He also mentions the Chukundrowa Buddha field, where beings are matured through material beautification of their world. So perhaps, Martha Stewart is a Buddha activity. Who knows? Through beautification. Well, if you think what she does is beautiful, different people have different taste. Also in this category is a quote in the light of the sun from the Ratnolaka mentioning such things as trees, medicine, wish-fulfilling jewels, and guides for the path. The second category is the Buddha activity accomplished through non-Buddhist teachers. The seemingly non-Buddhist teachers who appeared at the time of the Buddha are explained by Chodra as displayed in that manner due to the Buddha's compassion. So then Doja Sherab quotes from this sutra. Manjushri, in this Buddha field, when any other Tirthakas, meaning outsiders, heretics, such as Mimamsakas and Parivrijakas. Mimamsaka is one of the 6 Vedic schools. Parivrijakas are the non-Vedic traditions. So in India, there were Veda-based spiritual groups and there were non-Vedic based. So Buddhism in the context of history of religions, Buddhism in India is a non-Vedic. Then under the Vedic, which we now call Hindu, there were 6 major schools. So one of them is called Mimamsakas. But the Parivrijakas are the non-Vedic. So here it basically is saying the Vedic and the non-Vedic groups, all the spiritual groups that appeared during the Buddha's time, one must know them as the Tathagata's inconceivable blessing and the sphere of his skillful means. Why? In this manner, all these entrance gates of the others, such as the Tirthakas, exist as entrance gates to inconceivable liberations. They are nothing but an assured deliverance in the perfection of discriminative knowledge. They are nothing but play through skillful means. They are nothing but the non-relinquishment of the recollection of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. They are nothing but the achievement of perfection concerning the maturation of beings. They are nothing but the blessing by the Tathagata for the sake of the complete maturation of sentient beings. So it's saying, even those other alternative spiritual traditions were nothing but part of Buddha Shakyamuni's activities. So this is a very vast and expansive view. To me, again, yes, you could go in the wrong direction with this and just say, oh yeah, they're all good, they're all fine. Then we have a blurry picture of, what Buddha Shakyamuni taught. No, it should be very clear about what Buddha Shakyamuni taught and how that is different. Like from the Mimamsakas, from the other Parivrajakas, all that. But in striving for that kind of clarity, and I guess you could even say certainty, we should not fall in the trap of rigidity and judgment. Christians are wrong, Muslims are wrong, Hindus are wrong, Theravada is wrong, because, Sakya Pandita is wrong. No, we should not fall into that kind of rigidity, that kind of tightness, but to be able to see that all these opposing are, in a way you could say, debate partners. That's one way of expressing it. They are debate partners to help clarify our own understanding and absorption of the Dharma. Same sutra. Understand all these others' entrance gates, such as those of the Tirthakas. Tirthakas means the heretics, the non-Buddhist, to be the ability to exercise control over dhyana and super knowledges. The intelligent ones with the conduct of discriminative knowledge and means send out various emanations. That these other spiritual paths is due to Buddhas having established meditative concentration, dhyana, and super knowledges. Not only are their minds quiet and unmoving, but sharp and discerning. And in their state of being unmoving and stable and sharp and clear, they can use any and every means to guide beings in the state of liberation. Finally, the third category is Buddha activity carried out through Mara and afflictions. Elsewhere, Kyobar Rinpoche warns us so much on not falling trapped to the activity of Maras, and to be very vigilant against afflictive emotions. But here, again, on the one hand, we need to be vigilant against the afflictive emotions. We need to see how Mara, demonic activity, might enter our Dharma practice and mislead us. Yeah? But again, don't become rigid and judgmental. Know that even such things, sometimes Buddhas can use that to guide us out of confusion, to guide others out of confusion. The first example mentioned by Chodra and briefly explained by Dorje Sherab is that of the monk Tempe Lodro. According to that story, when this monk went to collect alms in one house, he saw a beautiful girl, and a strong desire for her arose in his mind. Even though he told himself to imagine her as unattractive, he could not behold her beauty. He could only behold her beauty. The Buddha knew this, and to tame him, he emanated a girl that resembled that beautiful girl. When the monk saw her, he said, "Girl, where are you going?" She replied, "I go wherever you go." Thereupon he became terrified and fled and went into solitude. So he ran away. Yeah? However, the girl followed him until the monk was tired. So no matter where he ran, this girl followed this monk. Of course, this is the Buddha emanating this girl. So until the monk was exhausted and standing in front of him, she said, now the Dharma instruction comes. Abandon me with your mind. How is it possible to abandon me by fleeing with the body? One does not abandon desire by fleeing with the solid body. Then she jumped into an abyss and died, and her whole body scattered. When the monk saw this, his desirous mind was pacified, and a great weariness arose, and the meaning of her verse became clear to him. He told this to the Buddha, and after that the Buddha taught the Dharma of the freedom from abandoning and obtaining all phenomena. Thereby the monk obtained the acceptance that phenomena have no origin and was predicted to become a Buddha in 10,000 kalpas away. In that way, the Buddha accomplished the activity of causing desire to arise in the mind of the monk. Yeah. The commentaries only briefly mention the other two principal afflictions. In the context of hatred, the commentaries mention Angulimala, the robber and the finger cutter, and in the context of delusion, the Purunakashapa, a contemporary of the Buddha who denied that karmic causes lead to results that must be experienced. Yeah? Purunakashapa is what we might call today a nihilist. Yeah? He taught that there's no such thing as karmic results. You don't need to worry about that. That's just made up. And then, so that is an example of delusion. But here in these commentaries, it says even that was a Buddha's, Buddha planted him, so to say. Then Angulimala is that story of, killing to get fingers to make garland. So that is like anger. But even that, Buddha planted that. So this is statement 9. again, so far, all these statements, is showing us how the state of Buddha is not just a mere state of the absence of confusion. More importantly, is the Buddha activity of benefiting beings. I think it's quite clear. I hope it's quite clear to you now that even the absence of confusion, why? What is the purpose of that? If it is not for the purpose of benefiting beings, then it's pointless. Good? Okay. Whenever we finish this, which will not be long, 15 statements, so 5 more to go actually. Then soon after that, I think, like I said, I will start Bodhicayyavatara. And I think the Bodhicayyavatara schedule, at least at this point, I can tell you. At this point, I am thinking it will be Tuesday morning and Saturday morning. This is based on the idea that pandemic might be over soon and everybody and their work responsibilities are going to take them away. Then at least, if Tuesday on the work day in the Western Hemisphere in the daytime is hard for you, it will be recorded and available, and you can listen to that before you attend live on Saturday mornings. So then at least you can attend in person, in real time, once a week. Then if you can arrange your schedule so that you can also attend Tuesday morning, then great. I just feel like if I were to only do the Bodhicayyavatara once a week, then it will take forever to get through 10 chapters. So twice a week, Tuesday and Saturday. That's my current thinking. It could change, but I'll let you know. So any translation, I suppose, of Bodhicayyavatara is fine, but I will be using the one translated by the Padmakara translation group. It's published by Shambhala. Shambhala right now is publishing another translation, which is a more modern and more readable translation by a Karmakagyu, Western Karmakagyu Kempo, David Karma Chopel, who is the main translator for the Karmapa. So Shambhala is publishing a new modern translation, so to say. But I've gotten used to this version, so I'm going to be using this version. This version is also, and then particularly this version, this size, I find it very, very user friendly. It can carry anywhere. But you can use any translation, it's fine, whatever you already have. Even then Spanish, just keep to that. Changchu Samcho Rinpoche Magye Banam Gyurchi Gebanyam Pamebaya Gone Gongdu Belwarsho. Kata.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Happy weekend.
You.